Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. This is Rohit. Friends, in today's video we are going to talk about the concept of fragment in Android. So in this video, first of all we will see what fragments are, then we will understand the features of fragments, how we can implement them in Java file, XML file, then we will see one practical example at the end of video which will give more clarity about the concept of fragment. So let's start the video friends. What fragments are in Android? So first of all, here is a dictionary meaning of fragment. Fragment is nothing but a small part, a piece or portion. So in context of Android or in discussion related to Android fragment is part of activity and it is also known as sub activity. So within the main activity, we may create a different part, different portions, which will represent different GUI, which will represent different components. That is nothing but a fragment. So here, let's try to understand what we are saying here. So let's say this is your main activity, and within this activity now, let's say this another portion I have created. So this another portion, this another piece is nothing but a fragment. Fragment, and this is our main activity. So within the main activity, if you define any such portion, any such area which can have different GUI, independent GUI, which may load different GUI, then it is basically referred as fragment in Android. So you may have n number of such portion within your main activity. You may have n number of fragments actually within your main activity as per the design requirement. So within main activity, if you are creating, if you are defining any portion, any area which can be replaced, which may have different GUI, then it is nothing but the fragment in the Android. Okay, now next to that, now we understood fragment is a part of activity first of all, and it is referred as sub activity. Why it is sub activity? Because it exists within the main activity. Now let's try to understand what features are there for a fragment. So first feature of fragment is that it represents the reusable portion of our application's GUI. Now what does this reusable portion means? So see here, if this is the activity and if I define fragment here like this, then this fragment can be loaded with different GUI components every time whenever user will perform certain interaction with our main activity. So for better understanding, let's say there is button 1 and there is button 2. Now whenever user will click on button 1, then here we may load different GUI, and whenever user will click on button 2, then in the same area we may load again different GUI. So this small portion is reusable for loading different GUI as per the user interaction with the other GUI elements within our activity. So on click of these two buttons, we may load two different GUI within the same area, within the same portion, within the same piece of area. That is nothing but the fragment. So that's why we can say that fragment represent the portion of screen which is basically reusable, which can be used again and again for loading different GUI. Next feature for fragment we have that there can be more than one fragment within the activity. So let's say this is your main activity. Now within this main activity you may have, let's say, two fragments. So let's say this is the fragment 1 and this is the fragment 2. Now you see this area of screen will load fragment 1 and this area of screen will load fragment 2. You may have n number of fragment within your activity. This is the second feature of fragment. Now third feature, it represents the multiple screens inside the single activity. Now same example you can understand, as many as fragment you will load within your main activity, that number of screens you will have. That's why we can say that fragment can represent multiple screens within the single activity. Next feature of fragment, that they defines and manage their own layout. Now understand this, as I told, whenever you are defining a fragment in activity, let's say this is a fragment. Now this fragment may have its own GUI apart from your main activity. This fragment may have its own GUI. So this main activity may have another GUI and your fragment will have another GUI. Okay, so it is having different GUI from your main activity. That's why we are saying that fragment defines its own layout, its own GUI, and it also has its life cycle. Now friends, here we know that there are two life cycles. First one is life cycle of activity and second one is life cycle of fragment. There is another life cycle in Android, that is life cycle of service as well. Okay, but that is not the part of discussion here. So here we should know two life cycles. First life cycle is activity life cycle and second life cycle is fragment life cycle. Now fragments are loaded within the activity. That's why the life cycle of fragment is also affected by the life cycle of activity. Okay, so what we are understanding here, that fragment will have their own layout, their own GUI, and they will also have their own life cycle. So they may have their own input events as well. So whatever GUI you will define within your fragment and user will interact with that GUI, so different event fragment can handle. So the point you will remember here, that fragment will have its own layout, its own life cycle, and it will have its own way for handling the event whenever user will interact with the fragment. So this is the feature. Now next feature of fragment is that we cannot have a fragment on their own. So fragment must be included within the activity, or fragment can be included within another fragment as well. So in our example, first case we are understanding. What is first case? That the fragment must be included within the activity, or they must be hosted within the activity. Okay, now whenever you will include fragment within fragment, so that will be the child fragment. So if let's say this is your main fragment, and within this main fragment if you include this another fragment, then this will be the child fragment. Okay, and this outer fragment will be again included within the activity. This may be the scenario as well. Okay, so this is the feature. Now the very important feature fragment is defining, that is modularity. So fragments introduce the concept of modularity in the activity and reusability as well. Now modularity means what? So as we know now, fragments are the small portions within our activity. So let's say if this is our fragment, then according to the concept of modularity, this portion of a screen can be added, can be removed, or it can be replaced it can be replaced during the activity is running. So that is the concept of modularity. So this part, whatever representing the fragment in activity, can be added dynamically, can be removed dynamically, or can be replaced with another fragment as well while activity is running. So independent of activity, certain part of activity, certain portion of activity can be changed, can be modified, can be removed dynamically with help of fragment. This is nothing but the modularity concept. So fragment also supports the modularity. And another thing we told, reusability. What does this reusability means? So same scenario you may assume. So let's say there are two buttons, button 1 and button 2. Now whenever user will hit this button 1, same area, same fragment will load certain another content. Let's say fragment 1. And whenever user will click on second button, same fragment, same area, same portion will load another content. Let's say fragment 2. So you see that the same area is used again for loading new content over here based on which button user is clicking. So that is basically the concept of reusability. So modularity and reusability, this is the important feature of fragment. Now next feature we have, we can use multiple instances of the same fragment class within the same activity. So if you want to load same fragment at different locations within the screen, then you may do that, or you may use same fragment in multiple activities as well. This is again promoting the reusability concept. So once you design the certain fragment, it is useful at various portions of the same activity, or it is also useful at various activities as well. And as we told, fragment can be added, fragment can be removed, they can be replaced while the activity is running. So these are all the features of fragment that we have gone through. Now the key part you will remember here, that fragment is nothing but a part of activity which is called sub activity. And what major features you are going to remember here? First one is representing the reusable portion. Second one is more than one fragment we may have. Multiple screens they try to represent. They have their own layout, their own life cycle, their own event handling. Then we must have to include fragment within the main activity, or we may include them within another fragment as well. An important feature you are going to remember, the modularity. And we may add, we may replace, we may remove fragment while the activity is running, and same fragment can be used within the multiple activities as well, or in the different portions of the same activity as well. These are all the features that you will remember regarding the fragment. Now next part you try to understand here how to create a fragment class. But before looking how we can create the fragment class, I will show you one diagram which will give you more clarity regarding the concept of fragment. So this diagram we have referred from the official website of Android. So here what this diagram is showing, there are two types of fragment they are showing. One is on large screen and one is on small screen. So first of all, you see how fragment look like on large screen, like let's say tablets are there. So this is the main activity you are observing. Okay, see this is the main activity. Now in this activity, this portion is fixed. This is the GUI of your activity, and whatever green area you are observing here, this green area is nothing but a fragment. Now this fragment can be loaded with different GUI, with different list of atoms. Whenever user will interact with this menu. So let's say whenever user will click on first menu item, different list of item will get loaded over here. Whenever user will click on second menu item, different list of item will get loaded here. So this part of GUI that is representing fragment can be replaced, can be loaded dynamically as per the menu user will select over here. So this is the activities navigation interface where list of menu items available, and this part is representing the fragment. Now this is in case of large screen. Now in case of small screen, you see this is the bottom navigation. So different menus may be available, and whenever user will click on specific menu item, this list of items will get modified. So this is again the green area which is representing the fragment user interface. So this fragment user interface will be changed, will be loaded dynamically. Okay, now next to that we have to understand how to create the fragment class. Now friends, see here, first of all we will have class keyword followed by name of the fragment class. So here name of fragment class is example fragment. We may have any fragment class name. Let's say fragment 1, fragment 2. Extends. Now this keyword is basically used for implementing the inheritance over here. So there is a base class for all fragment is fragment. So all behavior of fragment will be inherited from this fragment class. So that's why we are extending the fragment class over here. So complete statement becomes class example fragment extends fragment class, and in between this now we may have logic. Now in logic only one method we are going to write here. In logic only one method we are going to write here. One method we are going to implement here, and that method name is on create view. You remember this method we are going to implement within the fragment class. Okay, now let's see the quick example how we can implement the fragment class. Now starting is same. So class example fragment extends fragment. Now let's say I will change it to, let's say, fragment 1. Fragment 1. This is my class name. And now within this, as I told, we have to implement the on create view method. On create view method we have to implement. Now let's understand the signature of on create view method. So its access specifier is public, a return type is view, because it is going to return the GUI which will get loaded within our activity. That's why its return type is view. Remember this, its return type is view. So public view, method name is on create view, and this method requires 3 parameters. So first parameter is object of layout inflator class. So the object name is inflator. So for inflating the layout file, we will require this object of layout inflator. Second parameter is object of view group. So object name is container. Now in our main activity, wherever we want to load our fragment, that area is represented by this container object. Let's say this is my main activity, and in this activity, let's say this is the area I have defined for loading my fragment. So this container is representing this area, this view group. This will be basically the layout actually. This basically the layout, and you know layout are also referred as view groups. So where in main activity we want to load our fragment, that layout is nothing but container, second object. And third object for this create view method is the object of bundle class. So what is object of bundle class? Save instance state, as you know from on create method of activity. So these are the 3 parameters the on create view method requires. Now friends, within this on create view method, one statement we have to place, and that statement is we have to return the view first of all. As you see here, return type is view. So what we are returning? We are returning the view. And how we are creating view? So we are calling the inflate method of inflator object. So here it is an inflator object. So its method we are calling inflate. So this method will inflate the layout file. Which layout file we are going to inflate? So we have to specify that layout file name here. So let's say we are working with fragment 1. So whatever layout file will be there for fragment 1, that layout file we will specify here. So it will be specified within r.layout, and whatever layout file our fragment will have. This is the first parameter. Second parameter is the object of view group. So what is object of view group here? Container. So same object we have specified here. So this specifies in main activity where our layout, whatever layout we have specified here, where this layout will get loaded within our main activity. So that will be specified by this second parameter, that is container. And third parameter, which is specifying attached to root. So it will be false always in case of fragment. Okay, these are the three parameters that we need to specify for the inflate method. So if you create another class, let's say fragment 2, so all things will be as it is, only layout file will get changed. So you will replace this first parameter of inflate method with the layout file of your second fragment. Now here the meaning of these three parameters we have specified. So first parameter, you know, layout file of fragment, layout file of fragment. Second parameter is the object of view group where fragment will be loaded in our main activity. And last parameter, attached to root. So you remember that it will be always false in case of fragment. Now the reason why it will be always false we have given here. So whenever we are inflating and returning the fragments view in onCreateView method, then we have to remember that we have to pass the false value for the third parameter, that is attached to root. If we pass true value over there, we will get an illegal state exception error, because the specified child will have already a parent. So wherever we want to load the fragment, that layout is already part of certain another layout. That's why it has already a parent, and if you define it true, so it will generate the illegal state exception. So it is the fragment manager's job to add, to remove, and to replace the fragment. So that's why we have to specify the third parameter, that is attached to root, to the false. Now this is the structure of class, how fragment will look like. Now whenever you will create class, that is Java file, you will also have the related XML file. So for each fragment there are two files you need to take care, you need to create or you need to use. So if this is your fragment, then two files you will have. One file is Java file, which we have seen over here. This is Java file, and one will be XML file. This is XML file. Okay, so this file will define the GUI of your fragment. Okay, so next to that, how to create fragment in XML. If you are creating it manually in your XML file, so fragment tag you will use. ID is the parameter for identifying the fragment. Two attributes were specified, layout width and layout height, match parent, match parent. This is the portion of XML that you will use for creating fragment manually. Now let's try to understand what various classes you may have, which will be useful whenever you will work with fragment. So first class name we have the fragment activity class. So this is the base class for all activities that are using fragments. Second class we have fragment class. So this is the base class for all fragment definitions that we want to use, that we want to implement. Third class, very important class, fragment manager class. So this class is for interacting with the fragment objects inside the activity. So whenever you will load fragment and whenever user will interact with this fragment, so there you will need the fragment manager class. So this fragment manager class responsible for performing actions on your applications fragment, whatever you are showing within your activity. What actions it may perform? So let's say adding fragment, removing fragment, replacing fragment. So in example, we are going to use this fragment manager class and we will replace certain fragment, certain area within our activity with help of fragment manager class. So that is basically the job of fragment manager class. So every fragment activity, app compat activity will have access to the fragment manager, and which method they will use for getting the instance of fragment manager. So for getting the instance of fragment manager, we have to use get support fragment manager method. So this method will return the instance of fragment manager. Then last class we will have fragment transaction. Now at runtime, a fragment manager can add, remove, replace or perform other operations, other actions with the fragments in response to the user action that we know now. Now each of such fragment changes that you commit is called a transaction. So adding fragment, removing fragment, replacing fragment, all are the examples of the transaction. Okay, so these transactions are managed by the fragment transaction class. So object of fragment transaction class also we will require within our example. So these are the few important classes that you need to look into, that you need to remember, or that you need to understand while working with the fragments. Now let's try to understand what example we are going to discuss. So in our example, there will be two buttons, fragment 1 and fragment 2. So whenever user will click on first button, we will load the first fragment, and whenever user will click on second button, we will load the second fragment. So here I will give you the conceptual idea which will clear the implementation of layout file. See here, this is your main activity. Okay, now this main activity has linear layout, okay, with orientation vertical. So all components of this linear layout will be placed vertically one by one, top to bottom. Now within this linear layout, we are going to place one more linear layout. See here, this is another linear layout. Linear layout, inner linear layout. Now within this inner linear layout, we will have orientation horizontal. And within this linear layout, we are going to place two buttons. So here it is button 1 and button 2. So as I told, button 1 will be fragment 1 and button 2 will be fragment 2. Okay, now there will be another GUI. There will be third linear layout. We will have, let's say I will use this color. See here, this is the third linear layout we have. Linear layout with vertical orientation. Now friends, this linear layout we are going to use for loading the fragment. So whenever user will click on first button, first fragment will be loaded over here. Whenever user will click on second button, second fragment will be loaded over here. So friends, here one more thing we need to remember, this linear layout we have to specify with the ID. This ID we will require while replacing the fragment. So any ID you may specify. Let's say we will specify my layout. My layout will be the ID. Any ID name you may specify. So this example we are going to implement over here. So remember, there are three linear layouts we will have. One is this outermost linear layout, within which these two linear layouts we are going to implement. This is second linear layout for placing our button, and this is third linear layout for placing our fragment, for loading our fragment. Now I hope the idea is clear to all of you. Now we will go to the Android Studio and we will start the implementation. Now friends, here already I have created one project, frag demo, and we got these two files, Java file and XML file. So first of all, quickly we will try to design the set GUI. So we will remove this hello world from our activity, and this is our XML file. Okay, now first of all I am going to change the layout over here. So it will be linear layout, and here we will close the linear layout. Now friends, this is our outer layout. Now specify the orientation as we described. Orientation will be vertical. Now within this linear layout, another layout we are going to specify for placing our button. So here I will specify the second linear layout. So linear layout, so next to that layout width will be match parent. Next to that we will have layout height, which will be wrap content. And by default we know orientation is horizontal, so no need to specify. And now friends, within this layout we are going to place our two buttons. So here in the component tree you can see at top we have vertical linear layout, in that we have created this horizontal layout. Now I will quickly drag these two buttons over here, button 1, button 2. Okay, now we will change the text. So let's say here we will have fragment 1 and here we will have fragment 2. So this is how now the GUI is available. Now friends, next to that third linear layout we want to add here, where actually fragment will be loaded. So here we will start the linear layout again, linear layout, and here we will specify Android layout width, that is match parent. Then Android layout height, that is also match parent. And as I told, we have to specify the ID with which it will get identified while replacing the fragment. So Android ID @ +ID will be, let's say, my layout, any name you may specify here. And its orientation we will specify orientation vertical. So there should be Android orientation vertical. So this is how we have created the GUI. Now friends, you can see whatever this white area you are observing, in this white area we are going to load the fragment on click of these two buttons. So this is the quick view of GUI file. You see here, this is the outermost linear layout, within which this is the first linear layout we have created. This is the first linear layout we have created, which is defining the buttons, button 1, button 2, and this is another linear layout we have created where the fragment will be loaded. Here the fragment will be loaded. And important, you need to remember that ID we have to specify. This ID will be required in our Java file while writing the logic. Okay, now this is the GUI file we have completed with. Now let's try to move forward and create the fragment. Now friends, in order to create the fragment, we have to right click on the root directory of our application. Then we will select new, and here we will have the fragment option. Below to the activity, fragment option is there. Click on the first option, fragment blank, and now this screen will appear. Specify the name of your fragment here. Let's say our fragment name is fragment 1. Okay, any name you may have. This will be the layout file name, and click on finish. Now this Gradle sync process will happen for this fragment again, whatever we have created. It will take little bit time, and you see here, this is the Java file we got. Now you see two files we have. One is Java file regarding our fragment, and this is the XML file. It has by default text hello blank fragment. Okay, we will modify that. First of all, come to the Java file. Now we will remove these unnecessary things from Java file which we don't need. So these are the comments that we will remove. Then next to that, this statement we will require, as we discussed in the theory, public class. Our class name is fragment1, which is extending the fragment class. And as we discussed, one method we require. Which method we require? This method we require. Public view, on, create view, 3 parameters as we discussed, inflator, container, this save instance state, and we are returning the view. So see here, there is a layout file of our fragment, that is fragment underscore fragment1, object of container, and third parameter attached to root false. Already we have seen. So we don't have to do anything here. Just we have to remove all these other things. See here. So I will select it like this. You see, up to the class statement. Okay, and we will remove it. Now this is the final view of class that we will have. So public class, this is our class name, extending fragment. This is the base class, and one method. We have explained this method already. Okay, so this is how we have created the Java file. Now come to the XML file, and we will go to the code of XML file. Any GUI you may create here, whatever you want. So here basically I'm going to modify now this text. So let's say here we will specify text fragment 1, and few other things we will specify. Let's say text size we may specify Android text size is equal to 50 dp. Now you see it is looking like this. Other things also you may do, whatever color, background color, whatever you want, any customization you may do. So this is how we have created fragment 1. Now same procedure we are going to follow for creating fragment 2. So right click on app, new fragment, and select the blank fragment. Specify the class name for your fragment. So let's say fragment 2 and click on finish. Two files will be created here. So first of all, Java file. So we will modify now Java file. As you know, remove these all unnecessary part which we don't require up to the last method of fragment, and these things will be as it is. You notify the change here, the layout file is changed, remaining things are as it is. Come to the XML file. Again we will have the same text, so we are going to modify it again. So here we will remove it and we will change it to fragment 2, and text size we will specify here. So let's say Android text size is equal to 50 dp. Now how fragment 2 is looking? So this is looking like this. Now friends, our GUI file and two fragments we have created. Now we will go to the main Java file, and here we are going to write the logic. Now first step, as usual, you perform create the object, create the objects of buttons that you have created. So button, let's say b1 comma b2. Now we need to import this button class. Now next to that, here step number 2, you will perform fetch the reference for buttons from XML. So here we will write b1 button, find view by id, r.id.button. Button is a id. So here we will copy this and we will change it for button 2, and id will be button 2. Now step number 3 we will have implement the logic for loading the fragments on click of button. So for first button, b1 dot set on click listener, new view on click listener, and in that we will have one method public void on click view. So this will be the method we will have. Now within this method we are going to write the logic for loading the fragment. Now first of all, here we have to create the object of our fragment class. So here we want to load fragment 1 on click of button 1. So here we will create the object of our fragment 1 class. So fragment 1 is a object name is equal to new fragment 1. Object is created. Next to that, we have to create the object of fragment manager class. So here we will create fragment manager, specify the name fragment manager. This is the object name is equal to get supported fragment manager. In theory we have seen how we can get the instance of our fragment manager. So there is a method get support fragment manager. Now third step we have to perform create the object of fragment transaction class. So fragment transaction. Now you see we got this complete statement here. So we will import this class fragment transaction, the object of fragment transaction, and fragment manager dot begin transaction. This is the method. Now next to that we will replace the layout within our main activity now with help of this fragment transaction object. So we will write here fragment transaction dot replace, and now which layout we want to replace within our main activity, this layout we want to replace. So here see the id, what is id, my layout. So here we will specify r.id. My layout, and second thing, which fragment we want to load here within this layout. So we want to load fragment 1. So what is object of fragment 1? 1 is object, so we will specify 1. This is how we will specify the fragment. Now last step, we have to commit this transaction. So here we will write fragment transaction fraction dot commit. So here our logic complete. Now friends, you try to remember these 4 steps. First of all, create the object of fragment class, create the object of fragment manager class, create the object of fragment transaction class, and start the transaction with help of begin transaction method. Here with help of replace method, replace the layout within main XML file, and at last commit the transaction. So this is the logic for loading fragment 1. Now friends, we can write same logic for loading fragment 2. So what I'm going to do, I will copy this code as it is and we will paste it here for loading fragment 2. So what change will be there? Let's say B2 will be there first of all, button 2, and then here we will create the object of fragment 2 class. So our object name we will change, let's say 2, and here class name we will specify fragment 2. Now next to that, here we will change the object name 2, and remaining all things will be as it is. So friends, this is how we have implemented the logic for loading the fragment on click of buttons. Now let's try to run this project and see what output we will get. So friends, here I am using this Genymotions emulator which I have started already, and here the build process is going on. So as soon as it will be completed, we will get the output within this emulator. So here build process is completed and now it is launching the application. So friends, we got this GUI. So right now there is no any fragment loaded over here. We can see the complete white screen. Now let's try to hit this button 1. Now we see the fragment 1 is loaded over here, and now whenever we will click on button 2, fragment 2 is loaded. So like this, 2 different fragments can be loaded within the same part of screen, within the same portion of screen with help of fragment. That is nothing but the modularity, reusability. Okay, on the fly, the content of specific portion of screen can be changed whenever user will interact with this GUI of main activity. So friends, this is the concept of fragment and its implementation in the Android. So friends, if you find this video useful, please like and share this video as well as subscribe our channel for getting more latest video on Android programming. I will see you in next video. Thank you for watching.